Jacob was walking near the edge of his farm when he heard a strange sound. It was not a sound he had heard before. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't an animal. It sounded like someone crying, but soft and strange. He looked around. The wind was still. The trees were quiet. But then he heard it again. A high, shaky cry. He followed the sound. There, under the big guava tree, something small was lying on the ground. At first, Jacob thought it was a child, but as he stepped closer, he stopped. The child wasn't human. Her skin was a soft blue, glowing slightly in the shade. Her hair was silver, like thin threads of moonlight. One of her legs was bent in a way that didn't look right. She was crying, holding her small body tightly, shaking with pain. Her clothes were torn, her feet were bare, and on her arm, there, was a deep scratch that still bled. Jacob's heart beat faster. He looked around again. No one was there. Just this little creature, hurt and alone. He stepped forward slowly, hands open, voice calm. Hey. Hey there. I'm not going to hurt you. The girl looked up, her eyes wide and glowing. She didn't speak, but her body tensed like she might run. Then she tried to stand and fell again with a cry of pain. Jacob rushed forward. He knelt beside her, gently touching her arm. Don't move. You're hurt. It's okay. I'll help. You. The girl stared at him, breathing fast. She didn't understand his words, but something in his voice made her pause. Her small hand gripped a fruit, a guava, that had fallen with her. She dropped it slowly, as if to show she meant no harm. Jacob took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She was cold. He could feel her shiver. Carefully, he picked her up in his arms. She was light, lighter than a human child her size. She didn't fight him, but she kept her glowing eyes on his face, watching every move. He walked back through the trees, past his crops, and into the field. His house stood far off, quiet and simple, but he didn't take her there. Instead, he walked to the old wooden shed behind his barn. It was dusty, filled with tools and hay, but it was safe. No one came here. Inside the shed, he laid her down, on a soft pile of blankets. She winced in pain but didn't cry again. Jacob knelt beside her and pulled out a small first aid box. He didn't know if her blood was the same as human blood, but he had to try something. He cleaned her wound gently, watching her closely. She flinched but didn't stop him. Her breathing slowed. She seemed to trust him now, just a little as. He wrapped her leg in a soft cloth. She reached out and touched his arm, lightly, curiously. Her fingers were long and soft. She pointed at herself and said a word. Zira. Jacob nodded. Zira. Okay, I'm Jacob. She looked at him, puzzled. He smiled and tapped his chest. Jacob. She copied him, pressing her own chest. Zira. A moment passed in silence. Outside, the sky was turning orange. Evening was coming. Jacob sighed and sat back against the wall. What had he just done? This wasn't some lost puppy. This was an alien child. What if someone came looking for her? What if the government found out? But when he looked at her again, small, bruised and still holding his jacket like a blanket, he knew he couldn't just leave her. He gave her water. She drank it slowly. Then, using old papers and a pencil, he drew a picture of Earth and a star. She watched him with interest. Then she took the pencil and drew a symbol, circles and lines glowing slightly where her finger touched. Jacob didn't understand it, but he nodded. Zira smiled, just a little. Her eyes closed. She was tired. Jacob stood and turned off the small lamp in the corner. He opened the door and stepped outside for air. The wind was cold now, and the stars were starting to shine above the fields. But before he could take a deep breath, he heard a strange hum in the distance. He looked up. A silent ship, dark and sharp, floated high in the sky. It moved slowly, almost like it was searching. Then, in a flash, it vanished behind the clouds. Jacob stared for a long moment. He looked back at the shed. Who was Zira really? And what danger had just landed on his quiet farm? He didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing. He was not going to let her go. Not to them. Not to anyone. A secret in the shed. The sky was still dark when Jacob woke up. His back ached from sleeping on the old wooden floor of the shed. For a moment, he forgot what had happened. But then he turned his head and saw her, Zira, curled up under the blanket, still wearing his jacket. Her chest rose and fell slowly. She was breathing, safe. But a soft light still shimmered from her skin. Jacob stood quietly and stepped outside to fetch water. Morning fog covered the fields. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. He was hiding an alien child, a child who had fallen from the sky, and somewhere someone might be searching for her. When he came back, she was awake, watching him, alert but calm. He smiled and set the water in front of her. She looked at it, then back at him, unsure. "It's okay," he said softly, miming a drinking motion. Zira slowly picked up the cup. She sipped, then drank more. She was thirsty. Jacob sat down across from her. "We need to talk," he said, even though he knew she didn't understand. He pulled out a piece of cardboard and began drawing simple things: trees, stars, a house. Zira watched, then took the pencil and drew her own images. Circles, a triangle with wings, a small figure. Falling, Jacob pointed at the figure. "You?" Zira nodded. He pointed at the triangle with wings. "Your ship?" She looked away. Jacob understood. It had crashed. Maybe others had been with her. Maybe she was the only one left. That day, he didn't go to the market. He didn't answer his radio. He stayed in the shed, trying to make her comfortable. He brought her soup, bread, a warm cloth. She didn't eat much, but she tried. She was learning to trust him. When she fell asleep again, Jacob studied the scratch on her arm. It looked infected. He opened his medical kit and cleaned it better, careful not to hurt her. Her skin was warm, almost warmer than a human's. But the cut was deep. He needed to be careful. In the corner of the shed, hidden under an old blanket, he kept something from his past, a small metal case with special tools, leftover tech from the war. Jacob had once worked as a field mechanic, patching machines and drones. He had no use for it now until today. He opened the case. Inside, tiny scanners blinked alive. One by one, he tested them on Zira's wound. A low beep echoed from the screen. There was something under her skin. Jacob frowned. He picked up a different scanner, one that showed metal traces. A dot lit up on her shoulder. Small, round, and blinking slowly. A tracker. Someone had put a tracker inside her. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. That's why she was hiding. That's why she ran. She wasn't just lost. She was being hunted. He looked at her sleeping face. Her small hands were curled against her chest. She looked peaceful, but that thing in her shoulder meant danger. Jacob sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood, picked up a tool, and gently touched her arm. When she woke, she panicked at first, but he held her hand and whispered softly, "It's okay. It's okay, I need to help you." She looked at the tool, then at him, and nodded. The process was quick, but painful. Zira gritted her teeth. Jacob worked fast, using the scanner to guide him. Finally, with a sharp click, he pulled out the small metal device. It was no bigger than a seed, but it glowed red. He dropped it into a sealed box and slammed the lid shut. Zira was shaking, her face pale. Jacob held her gently as she cried softly into his shirt. He didn't say anything. He just let her cry. Later, that night as she slept again, Jacob walked to the edge of his farm and buried the box deep under the soil. The moon was high when he returned, but something had changed. In the center of his crop field, where no one had stepped, the grass was flattened in a perfect circle. Burned into the earth were strange markings, letters or symbols he couldn't read. One message stood out in the middle. "Return her." Jacob stared, his heart racing. Who had come? And how soon would they come again? He turned back to the shed, eyes full of fear, but also something stronger. Determination. They wanted the girl back. But Jacob had already decided. They were going to have to go through him first. She's not alone. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, shotgun across his knees, eyes locked on the field. The symbols in the crop were still there in the morning, black, burned into the earth like a warning from the sky. Inside the shed, Zira sat quietly with a pencil in her, and she was drawing again. More pictures, more strange shapes. But this time Jacob noticed something new. In one corner of the page she had drawn herself, small, scared, standing beside a much larger figure. The tall figure wore armor and had a strange mark on its chest. Its hand was gripping Zira's arm. Jacob's heart sank. Is this someone who hurt you? Zira looked up slowly. She pointed at the figure. Then she whispered, "Watcher." It was the first word Jacob had heard from her in English. "Watcher?" he repeated, confused. She nodded, then pressed her hands together, shaking her head. No watcher. No go back. Jacob understood. Whoever the watchers were, she had escaped them, and they were still looking for her. As he cleaned the wound on her shoulder again, he noticed a faint scar left behind where the tracker had been. Zira touched it gently and drew a small X next to the figure of the watcher. Jacob sighed. You're not going back to them. He walked out of the shed and into the fields, trying to think. What was he supposed to do now? He couldn't keep her hidden forever. The tracker was gone, but that crop circle message meant they already knew where she was. Then he saw it. Fresh boot prints. In the mud. Near the edge of the woods. Not his. Not hers. Someone had been there during the night. Jacob ran back to the shed and locked the door from the inside. He knelt beside Zira. Listen to me. If anyone comes, you hide. Under the floor, behind the hay. Understand? She didn't understand all the words, but she saw the fear in his eyes. She nodded. Later that evening, the radio crackled. A message came through from the village. Security teams are being sent to scan rural areas for unusual power signals. Stay indoors. Don't approach unknown objects. Jacob turned the radio off. They were coming. That night, Zira wouldn't sleep. She sat near the window, clutching a small silver object she had hidden in her clothes. Jacob hadn't seen it before. It looked like a small piece of metal with tiny lights. It pulsed softly like it was alive. What is that? He asked. Zira looked at it, then held it out to him. He took it carefully. The metal was warm. As he held it, a strange image appeared in his mind. Blurry faces, fire, screams, and Zira running through the woods, chased by tall, armored figures. The same ones from her drawing. He dropped the device, shaken. Is this your memory? Zira nodded. Her eyes were full of tears. Jacob realized then, she wasn't just a runaway. She was the only one who got away. The others, her family, her people, they were all taken, maybe even killed. He sat beside her. I'm sorry. She leaned against his side, small and quiet. Jacob didn't move. He just stayed with her, watching the stars blink above the trees. But something felt different. The air was thicker. He smelled something faint, metal, smoke, ozone. He stood and stepped outside. There in the sky, floating above the hills, was a drone. Silent, black, and watching. Jacob's blood ran cold. It hovered for a moment, then vanished behind the clouds. He ran back to the shed. They found us. Zira stood, holding the silver memory device tightly. She looked up at him with wide, glowing eyes. Then she pointed at the sky and whispered something in her language. Jacob didn't understand. But somehow, he knew exactly what she meant. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. The search begins. The next morning was too quiet. Birds didn't sing, the wind didn't move the trees. Even the dogs in the nearby village were silent. Jacob felt it in his bones. Something was coming. He stood on his porch with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, staring out at the long dirt road leading to his farm. Behind him, in the locked shed, Zira sat crouched beneath the floorboards, hidden behind old crates and piles of hay. She had not spoken all morning, not a word. She simply waited, tense, silent, scared. Then the rumble came. Dust rose on the road. 3 black trucks rolled in with silent engines, no markings, no flags. Men in black suits stepped out, tall, cold-eyed, armed. Behind them, floating silently, was a drone the size of a car. It scanned the ground as it hovered, lights blinking like hungry eyes. Jacob stepped down from the porch, pretending to be calm. One of the men walked up, holding a tablet. "Mr. Jacob Fields?" Jacob nodded slowly. "That's me. We're from Planetary Border Enforcement. We're scanning for unusual energy signals. It's a routine check." "Didn't know my quiet farm had anything unusual," Jacob replied flatly. The agent didn't smile. "You live alone?" "Always have." "Mind if we take a look around?" Jacob forced a grin. "You already are." The man didn't respond. He nodded to the others. The men spread out across the property, scanning the house, the barn, the fields. One man headed toward the shed. Jacob's stomach dropped. "I store old farm junk in there," he said quickly. "Nothing works, nothing of use." "Still," said the agent, "we need to be thorough." The soldier opened the door of the shed and stepped inside. Dust rose around his boots. He scanned with his device, slow and careful. For a second, he paused near the floorboards, but moved on. The reading showed nothing, because the tracker was gone, because the memory device was powered down, because Zira didn't breathe loud, didn't cry, didn't even flinch. The man came out a minute later and gave a silent nod. "All clear," said the agent. "Thank you for your cooperation." Jacob nodded once. "Can I go back to my normal, boring life now?" The agent stared at him. "You might want to keep an eye on the sky. Strange things have been falling from it lately." Jacob didn't answer. The trucks rolled away, dust rising behind them. Jacob watched until they disappeared from view. Then, he ran to the shed, unlocked the door, and lifted the floorboard. Zira looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Her lips trembled. She had heard everything. "They were looking for you," he said softly. "But they didn't find you." She crawled out slowly. Her legs were weak, but she stood. Jacob knelt beside her. "They'll come back next time, maybe stronger, maybe smarter. We can't stay here anymore." Zira looked down, then reached into her clothes and pulled out a small crystal. She placed it into Jacob's hand. When his skin touched it, a light flashed, and he saw everything. Flashes of her past, a facility, cages, cold metal, screams, needles. She had escaped during a crash. She was not a normal child. She was something rare, valuable, the last of something powerful. Jacob dropped the crystal. He looked at her, horrified and angry, not at her, but at what had been done to her. "No one will take you back to that place," he said, voice shaking. "Not while I'm still breathing." Zira stared at him, tears falling silently. Then she did something she had never done before. She hugged him, small arms wrapped around his chest. A soft sob escaped her. For the first time, she didn't feel like a lost alien. She felt like someone who belonged, and Jacob felt something else too. The anger inside him had turned into a promise. If they came back, he would be ready. The truth about Zira. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Rain fell hard on the tin roof of the shed. Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting the room in bursts of white and shadow. Jacob sat on an old stool, staring at the strange crystal Zira had given him earlier. He hadn't touched it again, not since it showed him those horrible images. But he knew now. This wasn't just about a lost child. This was about something much bigger. Behind him, Zira sat near the fire, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her wounds were healing slowly, but the sadness in her eyes never left. She was staring into the flames, quiet, as if the flickering light reminded her of something far away. Jacob turned toward her. "Zira," he said gently, "I need to know everything." She didn't respond at first, then slowly she reached for the crystal again. This time she didn't hand it to him. She placed it on the floor between them, pressed her fingers to it, and closed her eyes. The air around them changed. A soft glow rose from the crystal, and a voice, Zira's voice, but deeper and echoed, filled the shed. "My name is Zira of the Lavari," the voice said. "We were a peaceful race, farmers, artists. We lived among the stars without war." Jacob sat frozen, listening. But the Watchers came. They were not of one kind. They were many kinds, from many planets, cold and hungry for control. They took our people. They took our children. Images appeared in the air, floating like dreams, cages, machines, children hooked to wires. Some screamed. Some were silent. They said our DNA was perfect for control. They ran tests, experiments. Some of us were made into weapons. Others vanished. Jacob's fists clenched. Zira opened her eyes, tears spilling quietly. "I was chosen for reproduction," she whispered in broken English. "They want to make more like me, more tools, more slaves." Jacob looked at her, small, fragile, hiding in his old shed, and yet somehow stronger than anyone he had ever met. "You escaped," he said. "You broke free." She nodded. "Ship crashed. I ran, found your tree, fell." Jacob remembered that day, the cry, the broken guava tree, the blood. Zira held the crystal again. A new image appeared, her holding something small, a baby wrapped in silver cloth. But then men in black armor rushed in. They took the child. Zira screamed, the memory cut off. Jacob stared at her, shocked. "You had a child?" Zira looked down. "They took him. He was born early. They said he was theirs." Jacob couldn't speak. His throat burned. That was why she was running. Not just for herself, but for her child. "We need to get you out of here," Jacob said. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you." Zira looked at him, scared. "Where?" He stood and opened an old drawer. Inside was a dusty map and a broken communicator. Old contacts from his war days. Smugglers, off-worlders, people who owed him favors. "There's a man," Jacob said. "He helps people disappear. He owes me. If I can find him, we'll get you out." Zira stepped closer, touched his hand. "You help me? Even now?" He looked into her glowing eyes. "You're not just some alien. You're a mother. You're a person. You didn't ask for this." She gave him the smallest smile. "Thank you, Jacob." Then the shed lights flickered. The wind howled louder, and outside in the sky, a shadow passed over the moon, long and sharp, like a ship. They were coming, and this time, they weren't alone. The stand thunder cracked as the night sky lit up in white. Rain fell in sheets, soaking the dirt road and turning it to mud. But Jacob didn't care. He was already loading his truck with supplies, blankets, food, tools, and his old rifle. Zira stood near the back of the shed, watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. She had never seen him like this before, focused, fast, determined. His hands moved with purpose. Every step he took was filled with something new. Not just fear, but fire. "They'll be here by sunrise," Jacob said, tying a tarp over the truck bed. "We don't have much time." Zira clutched her small bag tightly. Inside it she had packed the crystal, a piece of the crop with the burned symbols, and the tiny drawing she made of her child. "We run?" she asked softly. Jacob paused. He looked at her. "No, not yet. If we leave now, they'll follow." We need to slow them down first. He walked into his old barn. Zira followed. Inside was a rusted machine covered in dust and cobwebs, an old farming mech. Most farmers used them long ago to lift heavy hay bales and dig deep trenches. Jacob had repaired it once during the war and stored it, never thinking he'd need it again. He pulled off the tarp. Let's see if you still got some fight left. Zira watched as Jacob worked for hours, sparks flying, tools clanking. Bit by bit, the mech's red eyes flickered to life. It stood tall, humming low, ready to move again. Outside, something crashed in the trees. Jacob looked at Zira. They're here. She ran to the edge of the barn and peered into the shadows. Figures moved between the trees, dark armored shapes too tall to be human. One held a scanner, its lights blinking fast. Jacob climbed into the mech, a heavy rifle mounted on its shoulder. They want you because they think no one will protect you, he said. Let's show them they're wrong. Zira didn't speak. She simply nodded, then touched the metal chest of the mech. It glowed softly. The machine responded, its lights turning from red to gold. Outside, the first watcher stepped into the clearing. Its armor was black and smooth, its face covered by a shining mask. It raised a hand and spoke in a cold, metallic voice. Return the asset. Now. Jacob stepped out with the mech towering behind him. She's not your property. She's not an asset. She's a child, a mother, a survivor. The watcher stepped forward, but before it could speak again, the ground exploded with noise. Jacob fired. The mech's shoulder cannon lit up, sending a blast into the trees. The watchers scattered, but they didn't fall back. They moved fast, too fast, and surrounded the barn. Zira ducked behind the walls, heart racing. One watcher fired a net toward her, but she rolled aside just in time. She grabbed a shovel, small, useless against armor, but raised it anyway. Suddenly, another sound came from above. A ship, sleek and silent, it hovered over the field, its beam targeting the barn. Jacob looked up, sweat running down his face. If they take her now, we lose everything. Zira stepped out from behind the wall. Her voice, though shaking, was strong. Leave. Or I destroy this. She held up the crystal, now glowing brighter than ever. The watchers froze. The ship stopped its descent. Jacob stared. What is that? Zira answered quietly. It's not just memory. It's proof. Of what they did. Of their crimes. If others see it, the whole galaxy will turn against them. The lead watcher stepped forward. You don't have the strength to use it. Zira's eyes burned gold. Try me. Jacob smiled. You heard her. He pulled the trigger again. The barn lit with fire. The watchers fell back, retreating toward the trees. The ship backed away, shielding its lower panels. After minutes that felt like hours, the enemies vanished into the clouds, leaving smoke, mud, and silence behind. Zira dropped to her knees. Jacob walked over and helped her up. You did it. She looked up at him, her face tired but full of something he hadn't seen before. Hope. We're not safe yet, Jacob said. But now they're scared. Zira smiled faintly. Good. And for the first time, Jacob knew. They hadn't just survived. They had fought back. The arrival. The world was quiet after the storm. Ashes floated in the air like snowflakes falling gently over the field. The mech stood broken in the distance, smoke rising from its chest. The barn was scorched. Trees near the road were blackened, but the land still stood. And so did they. Zira sat on the porch wrapped in Jacob's old army coat. Her hands trembled as she held the glowing crystal. It no longer pulsed with fear. It hummed with purpose. Jacob stood beside her, bruised and bandaged, his eyes scanning the sky. They'll come again, he said. Maybe stronger, maybe smarter. Zira looked up at him. Yes, but not just them. She opened her hand and showed him a small metal ring. It wasn't human-made. Thin lines ran through it, glowing faintly blue. Jacob frowned. What is that? She smiled faintly. A call. Jacob didn't understand at first. But then the sky changed. A sudden breeze swept the farm. The clouds above split apart, not with thunder but with light. A ship appeared, silent and beautiful. It wasn't like the cold black machines of the Watchers. This one was shaped like a petal, smooth and shining, its surface glowing with gold and green. It hovered without noise, casting soft light over the damaged farm. Zira stood slowly. Her coat slipped off her shoulders. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her silver hair glowing under the sky. The ship opened. 3 figures stepped out, tall, gentle-looking aliens with eyes like Zira's. Their clothes flowed like wind. One of them gasped when they saw her. Zira. Zira ran into their arms. She wept, and they held her. Jacob watched from a distance, unsure. Then one of the aliens walked to him, older, wise-looking, with scars on his face. He spoke in calm, clear words. "You saved her." Jacob nodded slowly. "I didn't know what I was doing. I just couldn't walk away." The alien smiled. "That's what made the difference." Zira walked back to Jacob, still wiping her tears. "They are my people. Fighters. We hide, but now we rise." She opened her palm. "Come with us. You're welcome." Jacob looked at her, at the ship, at the sky beyond, then at his farm, burned, broken, but full of memories. "I belong here," he said softly. "But I'll never stop protecting you. From here, or anywhere." Zira placed something in his hand, a small device. "If danger comes again, press this, we will come." Jacob nodded, holding it tightly. She stepped back, eyes still locked on his. "Thank you for everything." He smiled. "Take care of your child. Take back your life." Zira turned, boarded the ship, and joined her people. The ship rose into the sky, glowing brighter as it lifted higher. And then, it was gone. Jacob stood alone in the field, smoke fading, dawn rising. The earth was quiet again. But he was not the same man. Because once, under a guava tree, a child fell from the stars and changed everything.